JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Everyone has their favorite JoJo, as well as their favorite JoBro. Mine are Joseph and Polnareff, in case you were wondering. It really is a fascinating series that manages to have a completely different thematic feel for every single part. It jumps from Castlevania to Indiana Jones to Twin Peaks to The Godfather, and every part has its own protagonist, a member of the Joestar bloodline. And yet, viewers don't fall off after any particular part. If anything, most watchers tend to get more excited each time they get a new protagonist, something that almost seems counterintuitive. If you love a hero, you want to keep seeing that same hero tackle new adventures, right? That's why Batman has been Bruce Wayne for more than 75 years, and other characters that take up the mantle, they never stick around for very long. People are loyal to the characters that they love. But with JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, even though we love seeing past heroes stick around for later parts, it rarely takes more than a few episodes or chapters before we start to really like the new JoJo. It's always a very easy transition, and I want to break down why. In one of my videos from earlier this year, I discussed both Boruto and Korra and why I thought the two series didn't live up to their predecessors. The main reason I settled upon was that each protagonist was designed to be the opposite of what came before, and the lack of a consistent moral through line led to an underwhelming viewing experience. Boruto lacked drive, and Korra lacked respect. Therefore, they were grating to watch after getting so used to Naruto and Aang, respectively. So I thought, as a bit of a continuation of that idea, I would take a look at a series that very effectively succeeds at introducing a legacy of separate protagonists. To do that, we'll need to go one by one through the different Joestars and see exactly what makes them tick. So without further ado, let's hit it. The first of our heroes, born into a wealthy family and destined to save the world from the monstrous Dio Brando. His bloodline created an unmatched legacy. The thing about Jonathan is, he's simple. He's almost like a cardboard cutout of a hero, a real Captain America type. He is a gentleman, above all else, selfless, hardworking. He drinks his respect women juice and even somehow finds a small bit of love in his heart for his adopted brother, who tore his entire life to pieces. Jonathan doesn't have very many unique facets or quirks, because he is the original. He is the staple for what it means to be a JoJo, self-sacrificial with a duty to protect the weak. We see his sacrificial nature in his final confrontation with Dio. Sure, he could choose to die in the loving arms of his beloved wife, or later he could accept Dio's offer to become a vampire and perhaps live the life he's always wanted with Erina, but he chooses neither. He can't die peacefully in her arms, there's an infant that needs to be saved. He can't accept Dio's offer, it's better to die here with him than allow the vampiric menace back into the world. Jonathan is simple and he is good. Two things reflected in his very basic understanding of Hamon. His attacks are all direct, either punches or elbow strikes, and he only rarely uses his environment for his advantage. And this marks the first big contrast with his grandson, our next JoJo. Joseph Joestar is so clearly meant to be a contrast of Jonathan that it's almost laughable. The two have the exact same face and body, yet their personalities could not be any more different. Joseph is the trickster, the goofball, the secret genius who lays elaborate traps, always 10 steps ahead of his opponent at any given time. His Hamon is significantly more precise and powerful than Jonathan's, and his techniques using oil, string, rope, fire, and the clackers are all way beyond anything a Part 1 Hamon user would think up. He's battled vampires, pillarmen, stand users, and even defeated the ultimate life form, cars. Yet you wouldn't get that idea if you just spoke to him in passing. He's loud, rude, judgmental, proud, pervy, and prone to jealousy. Jonathan would be absolutely devastated if he found out his grandson was such a scoundrel. And yet, beneath it all, he holds the exact same moral foundation. Joseph may front that he doesn't care, but he puts himself in direct danger to protect the woman being attacked by Straizo, as well as Lisa in their first fight with cars. He sacrifices some of his own blood in a bid to ease the suffering of Wamuu, and he decides to commit suicide by volcano as a way to protect the world from the ultimate life form. He's constantly putting others before himself in a bid to protect the weak, and one of the best things about Joseph is that we get to see him at many different stages of his life, including his time as a grandfather. Some of his most enjoyable scenes come from his interactions with the one and only If Jonathan is the gentleman and Joseph is the trickster, Jotaro is most definitely the badass. He is the one that put down Dio for good. His stand, Star Platinum, is unmatched in raw strength, and he's likely even more intelligent than his grandfather. Again, a gigantic departure from what came before. Jotaro's stoic and cool persona contrasted brilliantly against Joseph's jovial and boisterous nature. When we first meet him, he just seems like a bad person, constantly getting into fights and disrespecting his sweet mother Holly. But we soon get to see that most of this is only a persona. Jotaro really is quiet and a calculating guy, and he does have a good bit of pride as well as an anger problem, but he really loves his mother, and he really hates to see innocent people get taken advantage of. He makes this pretty clear in his fight with Kakyoin.
だが、こんな俺にも吐き気のする悪はわかる。悪とはてめえ自身のためだけに弱者を利用し踏みつける奴のことだ。
Beyond that, his dedication to self-sacrifice is very evident throughout Part 3. He willingly gives up his personal safety if it means saving Kakyoin from the flesh bud. He lets his body and his pride get trampled all over by Steely Dan because his grandfather's life was at stake. And if we look at his actions in Part 4, he was more than willing to throw himself into the line of fire if it meant stopping a stand user that could bring harm to innocent people. Jotaro seems even less like Jonathan than Joseph did, but underneath it all, he has the exact same guiding principles. That said, these principles are a little easier to spot in our next JoJo. Josuke is a teenager, plain and simple. He's fun-loving, mischievous, materialistic. He's a kid, and he's great. He plays video games, skips school, and does his best to enjoy his life as a high schooler. He has no qualms about being a gentleman, he certainly isn't prideful or boasting, and he never tries to be the coolest guy in the room. He's not exactly an archetype like the first three JoJos, but that's not a bad thing. Josuke feels the most like a real person, and that's reflected in his relationship with his friends. He's generally pretty kind and helpful, but if you give him trouble, he will go out of his way to pay you back. The very last image we ever see of him is paying back a grudge from when Joseph spent all of his money. And even in his simple, emotionally reactive personality, it's easy to see how much he's like that which came before. The very nature of his stand, Crazy Diamond, is to heal others at the cost of his inability to heal himself. Every time he enters into a battle alongside his friends, it's an example of self-sacrificial nature. And what I think is the most special about Josuke is that we know exactly why he has these values. When he was very young and being attacked by his new stand, a stranger saved his life. He wears his hairstyle as a way to respect that stranger, and a reminder to himself to always live out that heroic ideal. I especially love this because it makes sense with what we know about his character. He's a very emotionally reactive guy. Of course this gesture would stick with him for so long. But what if Josuke hadn't been shown that kindness? In fact, what if he had been shown virtually no kindness at all as a child? Well, then you get someone like... Fighting God! Giorno is a fascinating take on a JoJo, as his personality is a fusion of his two fathers, Jonathan Joestar and Dio Brando. He has an enormous amount of resolve, as well as a burning desire to make the world around him a better place. But when you cross him, or when you hurt one of his loved ones, he becomes cruel, methodical, and vengeful. Both of these sets of attributes are contained in his stoic nature. He's quiet and thoughtful. He speaks so little that he actually makes Jotaro seem talkative at times. And this reserved sensibility is also expressed through his stand. Gold Experience isn't buff and strong like Crazy Diamond or Star Platinum. Instead, it uses the power of nature, a force of quiet growth that contrasts the excessive noise of humanity. And I won't even touch Gold Experience Requiem, at least not in this video. What I will touch on is how Giorno's values shine through his stoic persona. We know he's self-sacrificial. We see him quite literally forfeit his life to the enemy stand user on the sailboat as a bid to help Abakio solve the mystery. We know he hates to see the weak get trampled upon. He kills Pulpo for letting innocents die during his lighter test. And we know his morality came from the one man who looked out for him as a child, who was himself a gangster. And I think that sums it all up. We have a protagonist who is actively pursuing a criminal lifestyle, who participates in both torture and assassination. He's literally the son of Dio, the absolute antithesis to everything Jonathan Joestar ever would have stood for. And yet, their primary morals are completely in line with each other. And we, as viewers, are constantly brought back to keep watching because everything else keeps changing. Location, theme, art style, music, it's always new with each part. And to build off of that, each protagonist has a new and unique spin on the abilities of what came before. Gold Experience is wildly different from Crazy Diamond, Star Platinum, Hamon, and Hermit Purple. There is a single, unflinching pillar that is their morality, in a sea of ever-changing story elements. And the only way to describe this weird conglomerate of a story is JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, a complete mastery of the anthology protagonist. So, there you go. Those are my thoughts on how JoJo crafts the perfect series of protagonists. Do you agree with me? Do you actually think Boruto is the greatest anime ever to be put on screen, and I am just out of my mind? Let me know down in those comments. Go ahead and like, subscribe, and ring that bell while you're at it. I'd really appreciate it. And until next time, stay frosty.